The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Dawn and dusk, future and past. This seems to be the standard everywhere in the universe, from the world of One Piece to that of Middle-earth to even our own solar system. Except for Venus, because there's always going to be one, doesn't there? Move it, toots. Hello, humans of the world. I'm Dawn of the World. Welcome aboard. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is the theory that I've had for quite some time. In fact, the thought of making this theory into a video was one of the reasons that I decided to make a YouTube channel in the first place, and it has taken me until now to sit down and collect my thoughts. So here we go. West blue is important. So important that when my brain cells were first fighting one another to concoct this theory, I was even gonna go as far as saying that we would get a West blue arc. Now, I don't necessarily think that all of the Straw Hats will be taking a detour into the West anymore, due to the fact that One Piece needs to end at some point, and we seem to be entering something of an end game, in which an adventure out of the New World is much less likely, not impossible though, especially with much more plot-centric locations such as Elbaf and Laugh Tale on the horizon. However, I implore you to indulge me, to humor me, since West Blue, the birthplace of not only Robin and Brook but also Shanks, home of the 5,000-year-old tree of knowledge in Ohara, the birthplace of the song Binks Sake, the brewing place of some apparently sake, the strongest of the four blues, and the only known C without a known member of the Will of the D. West Blue is more important than most of us have realized, and I think it has a greater role to play in the series as of yet, has a major role to play in the future, and may have already played a major role in the past. So I'm going to open with this question. How many of all of you knew that Shanks was from West Blue? Probably most of you, but I'm gonna go out on a Sea King consumed limb here and say that there are some of you who weren't aware of that fact, and that's totally okay. In fact, not only is it okay, it's completely understandable, because why would Shanks be from West Blue of all places? Isn't it strange that Shanks is from not the Grand Line nor the New World like his old pal Buggy, but rather from one of the four blues? Luffy aside, he is the only emperor born outside of the Grand Line, and specifically in West Blue. The reason for this is as mysterious as Shanks himself. For such a major character we've known since chapter 1, or 25 years ago, we still know frustratingly little about Shanks. So the fact that Oda chose to reveal so casually in this line of dialogue that is easily forgotten, absorbed by the mammoth occurrence of Shanks and Whitebeard meeting here, that Shanks is from West Blue feels to me like an extremely important piece of information masquerading as a tiny piece of casual trivia. Kind of has an, oh yeah, I'm from North Blue, didn't I tell you, kind of vibe about it, and we all know how that went. I will just shoehorn in right here that one of the big ongoing themes of One Piece is that of equal opposites, or two sides of the same coin. Oda enjoys opposites quite a lot. Sun and moon, past and future, freedom and enslavement, etc., among many more. And you can't get much more polarizing opposites than the East and the West. Oda has already played into this a bit, with the East Blue being widely considered to be the calmest of the blues, whereas the West is, well, the Wild West. I actually bought this for Miss All Sunday cosplay, which I have not done yet. On that note, where East Blue can be symbolic of the dawn, wherein the sun rises in the east and Luffy's hometown is even called Dawn Island, could West Blue in the past have been symbolic of the dusk? Perhaps during a time that led to the Void Century, a dusk of the world transpired, with events that could have rippled out from West Blue, possibly from Ohara and the Tree of Knowledge. The fact that West Blue is the only known sea with no known members of the D clan could tie in here as well, unless it's just a coincidence, which it could be. Shanks being from West Blue, the opposite side of the ocean to that of his mentor Roger and mentee Luffy, at this point feels like a conscious decision. Is he meant to be a foil to them in some way? But again, since Shanks is frustratingly mysterious, this point may require elaboration at a later date when we do have more information. I don't want to go stepping too far into fanfic territory here. If nothing else, West Blue is important because Shanks is important. And we all know that he is hiding a bunch of things and almost certainly knew the truth about, redacted for the sake of anime-only viewers, since chapter 1. But more than that, the truth about his relationship with the Gorosei, while he was able to just simply walk into Pangaea Castle and have audience with them, and his reasons for having been on Roger's crew at such a young age likely have something to do with he and his Sake's place of origin. Possibly we'll get some answers in the upcoming film Red, so yeah, that's exciting. The significance of West Blue, however, hardly ends with Shanks, because we are just getting started, my friend. You see, West Blue has some important ties going on with a couple of the Straw Hats as well, being the birthplace of both Robin and of Brook. These two just happen to be the pair with the strongest ties to the past in the crew as well, with Robin being a surviving scholar from Ohara who dreams of one day unlocking the forbidden history of the Void Century, and Brook being, well, Brook, a living dead man with a whole former life that we know next to nothing about, and who is actually a surprising wealth of knowledge in an array of topics he'll only mention if they come up organically, and dreams of one day reuniting with his friend who is a whale from the West Blue. And whales are important. On the topic of Robin first, we of course have Ohara in West Blue. Or rather, we had Ohara, but what's important to note and often gets overlooked is that the island did not crumble into the sea. While devoid of human life and having at best the ruins of what once stood, the physical hunk of rock on which Ohara once stood is very likely still there. The only thing that is moving that is an adept user of the Gura Gura no Mi, or an ancient continent puller, or maybe Fujitora in a bad mood. And I don't think any of them have been there. There are a couple of details that were in that flashback that may be vague hints of this being important at a future point in the series. Among these is the fact that in the space underneath the Tree of Knowledge there was a poneglyph. A poneglyph that should be out there somewhere still, since poneglyphs are indestructible and even a buster call shouldn't have destroyed it. In all likeliness, this poneglyph could still be beneath the ground in Ohara, since I don't believe there was anything about the world government taking it away. They didn't have time during the buster call and may not have bothered after. This poneglyph contained not only information about the Void Century, but also the name of the ancient kingdom. That's important, right? And Robin didn't find that out. We may need to see this poneglyph again. And as far as we know, it is still underground on the husk of Ohara. It's quite likely that the cave of sorts that it was in did cave in during the buster call, but the thing is indestructible and it's quite possibly still there. There was also the detail of the Oharan scholars throwing their books into the water, which is less viable to rely on since, unlike the poneglyph, books are notoriously destructible and being underwater for 22 years is likely detrimental. Maybe the water had a high saline count and they crystallized, or don't know if that would help preserve anything, but So if this poneglyph is still there beneath what was once the Tree of Knowledge, and it's hiding this key secret, that could create an avenue for the Straw Hats, or at least a small group of the Straw Hats, in the event they have to split up again, to need to travel to West Blue to retrieve this key. It would also be a very interesting kind of full circle moment for Robin's character for her to return to Ohara. It could give her some kind of closure, as well as a moment to pay her respects and remember all the scholars and the people who died that day. As stated earlier, the main factor standing in the way here is simply time. One Piece is getting towards the end game. A detour into West Blue may not seem feasible, and yet I still have even crazier points as to why we might be going there. Or at the very least, if we don't go there, why West Blue is still really important and like the dusk to East Blue's dawn. So just quickly before I share my craziest piece of evidence, let's talk about my man Brook. Brook is from West Blue and has an entire first 38 years of his life that we know nothing about. That is absolutely bonkers. I've done a whole video on this already and I'm pretty certain that I've worked out which kingdom that Brook is actually from. I'll link the video here, but just so you know, this was one of the first videos I put onto this channel, and I encourage you to look at the timestamps and skip maybe the first 5 or so minutes. Unless unapologetic fangirling is your thing, then by all means. The small detail we do know about Brook is that during the first 38 years of his life, he was the leader of a battle convoy in a certain kingdom in West Blue. One of the many things I discuss in that video is that his transition from leader of a battle convoy to a pirate definitely has an untold story behind it, and his actions to this day may be seen as treason by that kingdom. Because switching from leading a battle convoy to becoming a pirate is probably a thing that you are not allowed to do. Now, while I'm on the topic of Brook, I think I should also cover Binks Sake. While never outright stated, Binks Binks Sake is strongly implied to have originated in the West Blue. Brook and the Rumbar pirates who are from West Blue would play it. Upon hearing the song, Robin, who is from the West Blue, says that it sounds nostalgic, and while on the very same page, Luffy says that Shanks, also from West Blue, and his crew used to sing it. Everyone who has some kind of history with this song is either from West Blue or has learned it off somebody who is. The only unconfirmed case is the montaging during Oden's flashback, but the fact that it is included in that flashback at all just kind of shows to support the song's significance. A decade ago, I thought that the evidence supporting Binks Sake being a West Blue song was kind of a fun fact, but knowing what we know now and that there is likely a deeper meaning to the lyrics, which I won't go into in this video, but a lot of people have covered it in other videos, makes the chance of it having come out of the West Blue a lot more intriguing. Binks Sake is a song sung by the pirates of old. Exactly how old is never specified, but we're starting to guess at least Void Century era old. It connects the past and the present and maybe even the future, which is such an ephemeral, overarching theme throughout all of One Piece. Oda himself has even stated that he wanted to tell a story that connects the past with the future. This tracks with the idea that should it have been a West Blue song, that something big may have happened in West Blue during the past, during what might have been the dusk of the world, which could have been just before the start of the Void Century, which was like the darkness, and is a darkness that has continued since then. Furthermore, Binks Sake mentions not only a sun rising, a dawn, but also a moon rising, so a dusk. Moving along for probably my craziest point yet. On the topic of the Straw Hat crew members who have ties to West Blue, while the West Blue is often overlooked, someone or something who is also often overlooked is Chopper. During his introductory arc, Drum Island, we learn that Chopper has a dream, and that dream is, of course, to be able to cure any illness. Now already the astute weekly reader from 2000, or whenever exactly this was serializing, may have raised their eyebrows a tad, because even at this early point, this was not the first time that a idea of a miracle cure that could cure any illness had been expressed. Because if we step into our One Piece time machines and jump back even further to chapter 41, we get the deceptively shortest of all Straw Hat flashbacks, which is also often overlooked. In this flashback, while desperately trying to talk his mother out of dying, this tiny Usopp tells her about a legendary medicine, aka miracle cure, that can cure any illness located on the other side of the sea. Keeping in mind he is saying this from East Blue. Stay with me, there is more to it. I really wanted to be sure about this and be certain that there wasn't anything misinterpreted in translation, so I tracked down the Japanese version of the chapter and this is what I found. Usopp doesn't just say other side of the ocean, he says achi no umi no mukou ni, mukou literally meaning opposite. It can also mean far away, but in the same sense of Australia being far away from the UK, the other side, or rather the opposite side of the world. The opposite side of the East being, if there's anything that we've learned about Usopp's lies since then, it's that Usopp's lies have a tendency of coming true. Therefore, there could be some kind of miracle cure on the opposite side of the ocean to East Blue. And this is further hit home when we reach Drum Island and we get to Chopper's flashback, wherein Dr. Hiroluku tells him this story. This story is about a man who had an incurable disease. Frustrated, he one day hiked up a certain mountain. The nondescript use of the word certain usually means Oda is withholding information. And when he got to the top, he saw the most beautiful mountain of cherry blossoms, which miraculously healed him. Now, what is painstakingly interesting here is that while Hiroluku doesn't specify which country this was, he describes it as being in the far west, as does Kureha at some point later on. And going into Wano, many people were expecting the Cherry Blossom Mountain to have appeared by now, with cherry blossoms being associated with Japan, which is what Wano is based off after all. And I guess the far west could also be interpreted as further west along the Grand Line into the New World, but the Cherry Blossom Mountain has yet to appear, and it may not be in Wano. Unless Oda pulls something in the post-Wano arc, in which case this theory is totally turned on its head. But I feel as though if the Cherry Blossom Mountain were to have been appearing in Wano, we may have gotten a bit more Chopper focus, or at least had him think about Hiroluku at some point during this arc. But anyway, as far as it's looking right now, the Cherry Blossom Valley is not in Wano, so far west being West Blue may still be on the table. Baby Usopp describes the miracle cure as being on the opposite side of the ocean to East Blue. Dr. Hiroluku discovers a miracle cherry blossom cure in a country in the far west. So where's it at? Maybe if there were there a country of flowers off somewhere? It could be there. Wait, there is a country of flowers in One Piece? Kano Country, Kano meaning flower and having the kanji to match, is home to the Happo Navy, who we met during the Dressrosa saga, and are part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. It is also home to their ruler, who shares his name with a delicious snack. Where Wano Country is based on Japan, Kano Country is based on China. And while cherry blossoms might be a Japanese icon, their actual native homeland is China. They originated in the Chinese portion of the Himalayas, which are, you know, mountains, likely thousands of years ago before making their way to Japan around 1200 years ago. And guess where this Kano Country is located, guys? Take a guess. Take a Wild West guess. There's even this fun tiny moment in Dressrosa when the Chinjiao family of Kano Country are introduced in the Colosseum. Upon Kano Country being mentioned in the background, a tiny cherry blossom petal flutters down to where Rebecca is standing. In the context of the Dressrosa arc, this was just something that Kyros would do for Rebecca to let her know that he was nearby, but in the context of the series as a whole, this could have a bigger double meaning, in that it also acts as an Easter egg of sorts for later on. This actually wouldn't be the first time that Oda has done this, after all. This scene in Impel Down, which is anime only, but Oda has a lot of say and the anime staff often know things, shows the guards playing a variation of Old Maid where you can't be left with a joker. We see a dismayed guard pulling a joker card just when a conversation about Shichibukai and dangerous people takes place. And we don't find out until much later on, during Punk Hazard, that Joker is Doflamingo's underworld alias, and he is a very dangerous person who, at the time, is a Shichibukai. Also, the horn and the third eye on that Joker card are quite interesting, but I digress. Just got a situation here that's a bit distracting. This is Minty. What do you think of the West Blue? You heard it here first, folks. The choice of placing Kano Country, aka Flower Country, a place clearly based on olden China in West Blue, is quite likely inspired by the novel Journey into the West, which seems to have already had some kind of influence on the story of One Piece, with popular theories and analyses circulating which highlight the similarities of Luffy with protagonist Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. Sun Wukong is born on Flower Fruit Mountain, so read in what you will there, I guess. But if Flower Fruit Mountain does exist somewhere in the One Piece world, I think that Kano Country is a pretty good candidate. And surely a place known as the Country of Flowers would have a flower mountain somewhere. In which case, this flower valley in which Roger and Whitebeard had their old catch-up in chapter 576 may be the same location. This would draw a kind of parallel that two terminally ill men, those being Roger and Hiroluku, possibly sick with the same thing, both visited the same mountain of cherry blossoms. Maybe it takes an extra special something for the miracle cure to take place, however, as even Hiroluku's apparent cure wasn't permanent. Another commonality that these men had was their outlook on death. Roger's assurance to Rayleigh that he wasn't going to die is backed up very nicely by Hiroluku's iconic speech that a person only truly dies when they are forgotten. Cue Roger through his physical death becoming the least forgettable person in history. If this is Kano Country in the West Blue, then it's very interesting that this is a location that the meaning of the Will of the D was discussed, especially considering, as we've already discussed, the West Blue is D-less. And considering Drum Island is where we first heard mention of the Will of D, a groundbreaking conversation concerning its meaning on what could be the same cherry blossom mountain Hiroluku once travelled feels like a nice parallel. This also takes place in what would have been the dusk of Roger's life, so a trip out into the West Blue during this time could be fitting in a symbolic kind of sense. As for how the Straw Hats, or whoever, could end up in Kano, if ever, it would likely be during the same voyage in which they'd visit other West Blue locations, such as the remnant of Ohara. A stopover in Kano would definitely be influenced by the Straw Hats' ties with the Happo Navy, seeing as they're part of the Grand Fleet. After all, part of their oath was that all the Grand Fleet has each other's backs and will aid each other if the need ever arises. And perhaps the beacons will be lit. Kano will call for aid. However, again, One Piece should be wrapping up in the upcoming years, so such a detour could feel very left of field, or rather west of field. Regardless, I don't think that Kano should be ruled out entirely. And something else that should not be ruled out is the 5 families of the West. Massive mafia families who control West Blue's underworld, of which Capone Beige was a part. Mother Carmel from Big Mum's flashback may also have been from one of these families, as she was a prominent underworld broker and was from the West Blue. Also worth noting is that based on her being 80 years old 63 years ago, she was only 2 years older than Kureha. And we all know the standard rule here.
All old people know each other, don't you know that?
But that aside, we don't know a whole lot about the 5 families of the West other than Beige. This is largely untapped territory, but given that the underworld has risen to prominence in terms of its importance during the post-time skip portion of the series, in all likeliness the 5 families will play a role in some capacity if we do end up going to West Blue in some kind of way. So hypothetically, in the scenario we do go to West Blue at some point, how would that occur? How would we physically get there? The answer to that is quite simple. As early as the Reverse Mountain arc in chapter 104, it was shown that you can in fact leave the Grand Line via the Calm Belt. It's just very dangerous to do so. This comes up again in chapter 433 in a much more descriptive way, in which Koby tells Luffy how the Marines coat the underneath of their ships in sea stone in order to swiftly enter and exit the Grand Line via the Calm Belt from the Blues. This answers how Marines and other parties may be able to quickly enter and exit the Grand Line without having to sail across the world or entering the Calm Belt unprotected. And while this does set up for the Paramount War saga, in which the Calm Belt was utilised a fair bit, it seems a little strange to me that Oda would bother to put in this much exposition without one day utilising this technology for the Straw Hats to also use. Especially considering Nami happens to be wiretapping at this point and making note of everything being said, especially when mere chapters later the Straw Hats get a brand new ship and a shipwright to boot who is all about adding upgrades to the ship to make her as top-notch as possible. Yes, Vegapunk is also mentioned during this part, and the conversation about him definitely overshadows the talk of the Sea Stone, but I think the relevance of both of these points is yet to be fully realised. But the time could be coming soon, since Sea Stone, like poneglyphs, is a specialty of Kano Country, which is where the Straw Hats currently are. It's quite likely that Nami would have remembered Koby's words from post-Ennis Lobby and could have relayed this information onto Frankie. So if there's ever a time for the Sunny to get a Sea Stone plating upgrade for her hull, it is swiftly approaching. And it's likely that Frankie won't be adding this with the intention to be entering the Calm Belt at any time soon, but as a master shipwright, he would know that you're never gonna know when you're gonna need such a thing. If Oda does choose to add this at some point during the post-Wano arc, that could make the chances of having to travel to West Blue at some point in the future far more likely from a story perspective, because not only will they have the means to do so, keep in mind that West Blue happens to be one of the 2 blues that is accessible from the New World rather than from Paradise. You can probably bet that that poneglyph we saw in Ohara made its way from Wano to West Blue via this means. With Frankie's shipwright abilities, Nami's navigational skill, and Jinbei as the helmsman, I'm pretty sure that a voyage through the Calm Belt is quite doable. Also in chapter 157, Usopp describes how he once fought a Sea King on the Calm Belt, a feat that at the time he of course had not accomplished. But at this point we all know that Usopp's lies have a track record of coming true. So be careful what you wish for, mate. So what do you guys think? Do you think we could be going to West Blue, or are we on too tight a schedule for such lollygagging? At the very least, is there enough evidence here to imply a more significant role for the West Blue, or is this just numerous happy coincidences stacked one on top of the other? Either way, I hope you've enjoyed the journey of this theory just as much as I enjoyed putting it together. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.